Recording has started. We have just a few minutes. Give it a couple of minutes before we get going. But good evening to those who are joining. We will start officially in a few moments. All right. Give it just another minute.
Hello, hey Rhonda, how are you? I feel like we need some music or something playing.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of feel like that. And that is something that I would typically do. But I think we're good to go ahead and get started. Be respectful of everyone's time before I start humming and singing. So good evening and welcome to our program. I'm Not Your Superwoman, Black women, Black families, and holistic wellness. I am Dr. Erica Russell, Associate Professor of Psychology and a Robert C. Nussbaum Honors College faculty member, and I am not your superwoman. Shout out to singer, I believe it's Karen White, who gave us an earth that proclaimed that message. Different context, but the message is the message. I'm not your superwoman. So we are so glad that you have joined us this evening, and I'm excited to introduce you to two of my sister docs who will share their time and expert perspective with us this evening. Before sharing a bit about them, I would like to note that this event is being sponsored by the NSU Center for Excellence in Health Disparities and the Robert C. Nussbaum Honors College. So first, with us today, we have Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board certified practicing OBGYN, wife, mom, podcast host, and course creator who is committed to helping moms have the most beautiful pregnancy and birth experience possible. We are delighted to have you with us. And again, I can't overstate my excitement for having you join us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we also have Dr. C. Nicole Swiner. So there's a lot of Nicole energy in this tonight, this evening. Dr. Swiner is a family medicine, general medicine expert covering a broad spectrum of both medical and mental health issues. As a wife and mother of two, she uses real life experiences to clearly communicate keys to better health and wellness for mind, body, and spirit. And we all need that.
Yeah.
I would say that we all need that. So now I'm going to set this up a little, and we will get into what I believe will be a rich discussion. I'm going to try to make some adjustments here as we go so that I can make sure that I'm hitting all my highlights. All righty. So in many ways, as Black women, we have been positioned to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, historically and in present times. Regardless of context, we have been known to be nurturers and fixers. We have been super, strong, and magical, all while being characterized as being intimidating, angry, and too much. We have been caricatured as mammies, sapphires, and gold diggers, and the like, and still there seems to always be someone, if not the very world, relying upon the Black woman. So this evening, we are going to have some real talk about the real lived experiences of Black women. We will consider their implications for Black families, and we will use this knowledge to move us toward holistic wellness, a better sense of wellness, because it is something that we all deserve. So let's get started, and we'll start at the lighter end of things. I'll pose this question to our esteemed guests. So now that I've shared a little bit about you all, would each of you share a little more about some of the things that you do outside of the practice of medicine?
Would you like Dr. Calloway to speak first or me?
Oh, no, go ahead, Dr. Swiner,
Okay.
go for it.
So, hey, everybody. And I appreciate you guys having me and spending some time with us this evening. I know, the work day is, if you're like me, the work day has already been long and having to order and think about dinner real quick for the family before we jumped on. So I really appreciate and thank you all taking out the time. And I appreciate Dr. Russell for having me in NSU as well. And being able now to meet my colleague, my sister colleague and Mocha Medicine colleague, Dr. Nicole here in the face to face, as much in the flesh as possible via Zoom. I'm glad to meet her. So I'm Doc Swiner, and I still, as full time I work as a family physician. So that means I see everybody from the cradle to the grave and in between. But when I realized that I was a superwoman, in the negative sense, was when I first had or came back from maternity leave having my first child, who's now almost 10, and literally passed out on the floor in the clinic because I was doing too much, doing way too much, not sleeping, trying to breastfeed, up all night with the kid, trying to take care of the husband, et cetera, right? So long story short, and we may get into some of the other pieces throughout the talk, but I discovered that I needed to figure out how to fit my own self in, and started doing some reading on the Superwoman complex and the Superwoman syndrome, and started doing some writing about that. So that's one thing I do on the side outside of practice is I speak a lot about the Superwoman complex and the Black Superwoman schema. and what that means, self-care. What does that mean? How do we take better care of ourselves? So I do a lot of speaking on that. And then from doing my own writing and self-publishing, I started realizing how many other friends, family, and colleague members wanted to also publish their books. So as I learned some of the twists and turns and tricks of the trade with self-publishing and doing media, I started helping other people with that. So I founded Swiner Publishing Company to help other people do that. And I get to do a lot of media with that, on TV and stuff. So that's been a lot of fun. So figuring out those side gigs has helped me to cut back a little bit on family medicine, which I love, but does stress me out. So that's given me some leeway and helps me to be more mobile and more accessible to my family at home, and thankfully be able to, make a suitable living. So I'm still discovering things, still a work in progress.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. Great.
Yeah, and I am delighted to be here as well. I know Doc Swiner, like she said, from Facebook groups and things like that. We're sort of a small community, and I know Dr. Russell we for over 25 years. We went to high school together, so it is very nice to have this sort of full circle moment. But as far as being a superwoman, I don't know that I ever really felt like I intentionally claimed that, although I certainly was doing it and just feeling like, I can do all the things. Part of my background or my personality is I'm a high achiever and I like to accomplish things and get things done. So it just sort of felt like this is what I do. And I go on to the next thing, go on to the next thing, go on to the next thing. And I would say probably in the course of my career, and this like short story long, I started out in medicine thinking that I was going to be in academics and I was going to do research. I was going to be an academic medical center type job. Did not work out well for me, and had this moment with my chairman where it was like we were talking about the terms of where I would go with my position, not doing research anymore, being primarily clinical. And he mentioned that someone said that I should be fired. And that was sort of like a turning point for me as someone who's a really high achiever, never had anything happen like that before. I got angry. Well, at first I was in tears, like straight up, and then got angry and said, well, you're not gonna fire me, I'm gonna quit. I found a new job as a hospitalist. So I work as a hospitalist full time. So I still practice full time. And the beauty of what I do shifts. So I work in 24-hour shifts at a time where I just deliver who happens to be at the hospital. And it kind of, as things go, that bad moment, as often happens in life, turned out to be a turning point for me. And that flexibility in my schedule allowed me to realize and open up the possibilities of like, it doesn't have to be a struggle, and I can put myself and the things that are important to me and the things that I want, and think about what I want to do and how I want to spend my time and how I want to live my life and how I want to be of service and share my gifts in a way that is not overwhelming, in a way that is not, is not stressful. So I now do that. I still practice full time. And then I also host a popular podcast on pregnancy and birth called All About Pregnancy and Birth. I'm super proud. It just crossed 500,000 downloads. So, and I also have an online childbirth education class. So those things are kind of similar in terms of what I do, but the business side of my podcast and course is going to allow me to back down in my clinical work a bit. But the flexibility of my clinical schedule allows me to have time with my children, and then as Doc Swiner said, stepping back and take a more holistic approach in working on myself as a full and complete human being, mentally, spiritually, physically, all of those things, and being intentional about that.
Yes, intentionality. That is the one of the most important words that I kind of continue to revisit with myself often. And it's interesting to kind of hear how, there are these moments that we encounter, that we experience that kind of make us more aware of ourselves, and kind of how we have been moving through life. Like it takes those moments for us to kind of say, let me kind of take a step back, look at what I have been doing. And then it's kind of almost like, well, wow, I was doing all that and I had no idea. But, it definitely sounds like for each of you, it was a setup for a shift that will allow you to take more, I would say, control, ownership of what your experience, what you want to do with your expertise and with your lives. Interestingly, I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a professor, of course, but I kind of, for a time, would describe myself as being an accidental academic because I was in a clinical position in which I wanted to avoid clinical burnout and kind of transitioned into higher ed that way. And so I too had a moment where, it was kind of like, I don't want to burn out this way. I'm going to go and I'll consider this. It was a mentor who introduced or had me to consider higher ed, and the rest is history in ways similar to that which you all described, but just within the higher educational context. So,
yeah, and it's like if you don't listen to those moments will something will grab your attention eventually to get you to do something different. I don't know where I heard this, but it's like God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, will throw you a rock or a little pebble, then it's a rock, then it's a brick, then it's a boulder before you pay attention and listen. So either you can learn how to tune into yourself and listen to those things early, or you can wait.
Or you hit the floor like I did.
Well,
you hit rock bottom, literally. Yeah.
It's like one way or the other. Which one? You're gonna get it. You're gonna get the lesson eventually. And it's great to know that we're all winning. We're all winning. So here's another, again, still on the lighter side. I want us to kind of consider some popular sayings, ones that perhaps look good on a t-shirt, but have implications for our overall wellness. What are some of the health outcomes associated with some of these popular messages? Grind until you die. I'll sleep when I'm dead. No pain, no gain. And I'm every woman.
That's so funny. I love this. I love this question because I have a good friend of mine who's in the music industry. He's actually a patient of mine, but friends first, and in the music industry, and was doing this and doing that, actually a Black male. And his favorite hashtag is no sleep, hashtag no sleep, right? And I argue with him all the time. I'm like, look, you're getting older, you're not a 20-year-old something hip hop star anymore. Like, you are now a father of two, you have a wife, you're getting older, and etc. You need to go to sleep. Like, stop playing. You need to go to sleep. We're not, staying up all night as college students and can get up the next, in 2 and 3 hours and do what we got to do. We need sleep. Sleep is restorative. So if you're not sleeping well, for whatever reason, either you are, I know right now with the pandemic, everything's a little bit different, but, I've had to force myself to turn Netflix off, or turn the reality TV off, which is something that I kind of do. I think they call it, there's a term they use now, particularly during the pandemic. It's like revenge. What's it called? Have you ever heard this? Like, essentially it's the act of staying up late, once you put everybody to bed, it's nighttime, and you're supposed to be asleep, but instead you watch TV on purpose and stay up late. It's like reclaiming your time at night because you don't have to, right?
Yes.
So we've been doing a lot of that, especially during the pandemic, binge watching, right? All that. But I've had to force myself to turn the TV off because I need my 6 to 8 hours of sleep consistently. We all need that. If you're not sleeping well, you'll end up in the doctor's office with your high blood pressure, your trouble losing weight. Somebody said I will sleep. Oh, okay. Dr. Khadija is repeating what we were saying about sleeping when I'm dead. Yeah, you can't do that. But you'll end up in the doctor's office with high blood pressure. Your sugars are going to go up. Your cortisol is going to go up. You're going to gain weight. You're going to, your mood's going to be off. Headache. Almost. I can probably link most health conditions and health issues to lack of sleep or some disturbance of your sleep. So don't sleep when you're dead. Sleep now. please, folks.
Right.
I mean, our
Yes.
society has created this image of hustling and going all the time as a badge of honor and as something to aspire to. I think we're getting better about it, but it's not. It's literally killing people. And when you add on the stress of being a Black person on top of all of that pressure, it really accelerates the problems that we have when you deal with that chronic stress. So just like to specifically speak to some of the things, like, well, part of us, or I would say our history and culture, like grind till you die, is because, well, we had to in order to survive in some ways. Like we didn't, whether it was all the way back to slavery or Jim Crow, you had to kind of push in order to move forward. And although we certainly have a lot of work to do, we have benefited from the work that our forefathers and foremothers have done in order to help us, so that we don't necessarily have to do that all the time, and we can take a step back and be more intentional about what we do. I mean, sleep is just so important. Like, it's just, our bodies need sleep. It's an important part of rest, and not thinking that, and no pain, no gain. There's certainly this, you have to work hard. The only way you can get where you want to go is to work hard, and work yourself till it's crazy, spend all this time. I completely rebuke that. My word, one of my words for 2021 is ease. Like, I have it written on a board. Like, I keep, like, I'm not going to be, it's not going to be painful. It doesn't have to be painful. We don't have to claim that narrative at all. So.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, I saw Dr. Khadijah put revenge bedtime procrastination. That's what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, so when you think about all of the things that we have on our plates, and if we're working and we're focused on all these things and it kind of continuing to carry on that message of that we have to do all those things. And then it kind of goes back to the way that we're socialized too, in terms of the way we receive messages about how, in order for us to get ahead, we have to work 10 times harder, or we have to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And then the rules change as we go. That has been something that has been internalized. And so we do find ourselves, especially when you, not just when you are a high achieving person, but that definitely, like, hey, well, doing all the things, like that was one of those tangible, they have been viewed as a tangible marker of, oh, you're doing it. You're really successful. Like, I don't want my success to be defined by how busy I am, such that I have to then deprive myself of sleep in order to steal away to watch television, so I can just fall asleep and rewind because I'm trying to get revenge to regain time. Like, when we just say that out loud, it's just like, what are we doing to ourselves when we kind of continue to try to suppress and grind in that way? All right. So we've been, the title has, I'm Not Your Superwoman. I quoted the Karen White lines. But what does it mean to be a superwoman, or what is the superwoman syndrome that is often referenced when we're discussing Black women? So anybody want to kind of unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying, when I found out I was a superwoman again when I passed out at work, because I wasn't sleeping right, wasn't eating right, breastfeeding, giving away all my nutrients, and not taking time for myself. But there's a book that was written in 1978 by Marjorie Stiegler called The Superwoman Syndrome. And so I started looking into those things and reading more about it. It was actually my father who brought this whole thing. Interestingly, my father was the one who brought this to my attention and said, look now, like, you can't, we need you around. We don't need you passing out at work. Like, you're having kids now, you have a husband, like, let's get it together. So I started reading more about the Superwoman Syndrome and what this meant. And essentially what it means is, what you can assume, essentially feeling like you only you can do things perfectly for everyone and fix the problems of the world and everyone around you, and then ultimately forget about yourself. And so then what happens after that is that when you forget about yourself, then all these horrible detrimental effects happen, and we use these harmful coping mechanisms, and that's more harmful because we're, you know, overeating or smoking or drinking alcohol too much, and we're ultimately or avoiding being treated for mental health issues, because we're trying to take care of the world. So that's kind of where I first learned about it. And then there have been many, many things written about it since then. I also want to shout out Dr. Cheryl Giscombe. I don't know if you know her, Dr. Russell, but she's a soror and a PhD here in the North Carolina area. And she also did a lot of research on the Black Superwoman schema. And by the way, we're gonna be doing some more Instagram lives together and talking about her research specifically for Black women in that model. But that's what, you know, being a superwoman means to me.
Mhm. Um, it also causes me to think about, as I hear you kind of define the superwoman syndrome and kind of this mindset that we get, like that we have to do it, like there's no one else to do it, so we have to do it. um Another one of the labels or stereotypes that, you know, often again is really t-shirt ready, um, that comes with some consequences, I believe, for us, is this kind of the notion of the strong Black woman. And so like, I remember earlier in my earlier years when I was kind of early in my graduate studies, I used to kind of, you know, imagine doing some research that would have explored, like, you know, the catch 22 of that. And so I was interested in knowing, you know, what are your thoughts about the designation of strength, you know, the way that we are often characterized as being strong, and what are some of the consequences, benefits and or consequences of being identified in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fine line and a balance. Like, yes, you want to be perceived as strong. Well, I should say it needs to be something that's internal. So much of the strong woman complex is external perceptions of how Black women should be in order to do all the things, be all the things for everybody.
Mhm.
Strength should be something that is comes from internally, and that you can use it to your own benefit and advantage, because there is a spectrum where it can become toxic, where you feel like you can't sit down or you can't ask for help or you can't just breathe sometimes, even because you always have to carry this weight. So you have to use it in a way that works for you, but not so much carrying that whole burden and things associated with it. Because sometimes you need to rest, you need to sit down, you need to step back, you need to reassess and kind of figure things out.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, if I could actually throw in my own question to Dr. Nicole, particularly as she is a practicing OBGYN, you know, we've been having a lot of talk about minority women and mortality with delivery and birth and labor, et cetera. You know, I would love to hear your perspective on how the strong Black woman affects us, you know, in the medical setting when you're in the hospital and delivering babies and all that. You know, have you been in the mix in terms of these discussions that we've been having and trying to make things better?
Sure. One of the things that it comes up with research back is that people don't perceive that Black people have pain when they actually do. So
Mm.
they don't take their pain seriously enough, and feel like they can't, experience pain. Of course, that goes all the way back in gynecology to J. Marion Sims, who's the quote unquote father of gynecology. He did
Yes.
experiments on enslaved women with no anesthesia, really horrific kind of things in order to grow the field of gynecology. And it was thought then that slaves and Black people didn't feel, Black women didn't feel pain, even though they screamed out in pain. And he wrote that they screamed out in pain. That has continued to some degree. And there are many modern day studies that demonstrate our pain is not taken as seriously. So that definitely plays a role in outcomes, and Black women have a maternal mortality rate that's 3 to 4 times that of white women. So that's definitely one way that strong comes in. Also, in that we just deal with chronic stress on a daily basis and racism, and having to shoulder that and deal with that, and be expected to do so in some degrees in some settings, especially professional settings, I would say, and those constant sort of microaggressions, and manage all of those things can make a difference in terms of your outcomes, both physically and mentally. It's interesting, of my girlfriends. So we have a group of us that train together. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, and myself included. 1, 2, 3. 3 out of the 5 of us had preterm births. 2 had preeclampsia. 1 was very ill. And you have to wonder if some of the things, and we have all of the advantages of education, and you think that we would not have those things happen, but you have to step back and look and say, kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that you make, that, even when we account for socioeconomic status, education, or what have you, we're still seeing that Black women, Black people generally, but Black women specifically for the purposes of this discussion, are disproportionately impacted on a number of different health indicators as well. I mean, physical and mental health. When I talk to my students, I often use the example of our cell phones, because, we all have our cell phones. We love our cell phones. And I remember when I first got my first iPhone, and I didn't really understand why the battery was draining so quickly. And they were like, well, you have to close all the apps. If you have all those apps running in the background, it kind of drains the energy. I said, well, when we think about ourselves, we're living in a state, in an existence where, racism and discrimination and things of that nature are a regular part of your daily life, and it's running in the background. And then you're dealing with overt and covert expressions of those things. There's a different type of wear and tear that comes on the body. And then for Black women, as women who have historically been the ones who, had to kind of take care of things, definitely taking on that nurturing role, formally or informally, there is that tendency. We can kind of go on and see where, it does make sense that some things need to change. Some things need to be illuminated, because I think the other thing is that because there are these historical accounts in which, there has been a considerable amount of time where folks have like, oh, well, they have a high tolerance for pain, or, or we don't experience pain, or, we have out of necessity continue to push through and show up even when we weren't feeling well. I think that's why these types of conversations, the related research is necessary. And it's not just necessary amongst us, that's why it's important that we are having the podcast, that we are engaging in the research and writing in various medium to allow for folks to no, you don't get to not know it. It's time for us to not just kind of sit with it and work through it as if it is our own issue.
Yeah.
It's a shared issue. It's a responsibility that, belongs to everybody, as far as I'm concerned.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm kind of watching the time, and I want to make sure that we can cover a few more questions and leave some time also for the audience members to pose some questions as well. So one of the questions that I would like to have each of you to respond to is considering your area of expertise, what is the one topic or issue you want to raise awareness about that is important to promoting holistic wellness for Black women and families? Like, what is it that it is critical that we know and do or do differently? So what is that one thing that, you know, if the webinar was going to shut down right now, which is not, you're like, I really want to make sure that we kind of touch on this.
Yeah. I like how Dr. Calloway's word, she shared her word for this year, was it?
Ease, yes.
Ease, yes.
Mhm.
I like that. And mine was similar because I picked rest for 2021. 2020 was crazy, and we're still living with the leftovers of it. Although I do, you know, feel more of a light at the end of the tunnel now. But my focus and goal always, especially as I've been, you know, living this No Superwoman life, is to find more places of rest. And so for me, this year, that meant taking a month off, from work, which was a blessing. And then, you know, I realize not everyone can do that or is able to do that, but I do feel that we don't do a good job of allowing ourselves to take a break. We don't ask for that sick leave. We don't take the PTO. We don't, you know, a lot of us are working more from home during the pandemic, and it's not been easier. And our workload has not been lighter. We're actually probably working more because it's harder to turn the screens off when you're at home. So I have, you know, tried to be an advocate for my patients and my colleagues, to give them permission to say, hey, you know, when's the last time, I know you're working from home, you don't feel like you're going in the office and spending, you know, 8 to 12 hours at work, but you really are. Like, when's the last time you took a mental health day? Or do you need FMLA because you're in that sandwich generation where you're not only taking care of kids, but you're taking care of elderly loved ones? Have you taken a break? You know, there's a caretaker syndrome that happens, you know. So I have been intentional myself about creating spaces of rest and shutting down my schedule. And as Dr. Calloway probably knows, you know, just having these side businesses and being an entrepreneur on the side of your main gig, or alongside your main gig, is like the clock never stops, right? So it's like, okay, well, I'll just throw in this quick meeting and this quick consultation, and I'll talk to this client real quick. But I had to shut down my schedule and say, okay, no, these days I'm not going to take any meetings, and you know, I'm not going to answer my phone, you know, on Saturday, you know. So we have to do that on purpose because we need to rest and gives ourselves more of a break.
Yeah, and I will ask, didn't you realize when you do that, the world didn't fall apart?
It didn't.
Everything still happens.
Nope. And they had to learn, the adults had to learn how to take care of themselves.
Yeah, right. Right. And I think I definitely, rest is so important. Nicole is absolutely correct. The world continues to spin. Go figure. Like, the world continues to turn. And so now that we have two medical professionals and a mental health clinician, my question to you, like, say we have people who are employers who happen to be kind of logged in at this moment to this conversation or have a chance to come by it, you know, since we're recording and all. Like, what happens when we don't get rest? We've talked about, you know, the realities of life as Black women living in Black bodies and the expectations of strength and the tendency to want to do and take care of and be expected to do all the things. If we're not able to center rest, what happens? And perhaps, you know, what might be some things that, you know, the person, you know, it is a blessing to be able to take a month off, you know, that is truly a blessing. But like, say we have people who are not able to take a month off. What is some version of that that may allow them to create the space to replenish? Because rest is essential. I'm of the opinion that it is an entitlement. And that is the disposition that we need to move toward, but we're not there yet. So what can we share with the people?
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and answer, and then I'll circle back to the one thing because I still have it on my mind that I want people to know. So why
Okay, well,
don't
no,
you?
you go ahead. You answer that. You say that first. Yeah.
Oh no, no, I just in terms of like in the healthcare perspective especially is that you must, I repeat, must be comfortable being your own best advocate
Mhm.
because some our system, especially for women, is based on misogyny and it's based in racism, and you have to be able to advocate for yourself. Otherwise it can be, and I don't want to be dramatic about it, but it can be life or death
Mm-hmm.
if
Yeah.
you don't advocate for yourself and speak up. Sometimes we're taught or felt to believe, you don't challenge authority and things like that, and that sort of dynamic. But at the end of the day, that doctor, that person is going to go home. You're still going to be left with the things that you have. So you have to be able to advocate for yourself and speak up if need be. Sometimes that means going to different places, asking for a different provider, escalating things until you get a resolution to what you're looking for. And one of the important ways to be able to advocate for yourself is to empower yourself with information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these days there's lots of ways that, I'm biased because I happen to provide a podcast that has a lot of information specifically for pregnancy and birth. But there are other ways that you can stay informed and take ownership of your body and your health and advocate for yourself. That's just really, really important.
Yes.
And then as far as the rest piece, I would say that sometimes it's not always like even if you can take it in small bites, sometimes you have to, and you can build upon it. So some days it just may be like, I'm shutting down at 6 o'clock. Like I'm just gonna shut down. Some of it is a little bit of figuring out how things work. Like as Dr. Swiner was saying, sometimes you just have to stop it. And then you realize that you kind of figure things out a little bit. Maybe there may be one or two things that didn't get done exactly when you wanted them to get done. I can tell you 99% of the time it's okay. Like things just aren't stressful. So sometimes take it in small bites. Like I've recently decided, as she was mentioning, yes, because I run this business on the side, it's easy to pop on the computer, do a little bit of this, do a little of that. I shut it down after dinner. It's that this is not the time to be doing those things, and just being intentional and setting yourself up that to be intentional about rest. And what you'll find actually when you do that is that the times when you are dedicating yourself to work, you tend to be more productive because you know that, okay, I'm not going to do this at night. This is when I got this time to get this done. So you work and you get it done a bit better. It's that, I don't know what the theory is called, but like you fit the activity into the time that you have. So if you put it in a certain amount of time, you get it done, and then you can kind of work yourself around that. But yeah, definitely just take small bites for rest, even if it's sitting outside or taking a walk outside or just shutting things down for 10, 15 minutes. I believe we all have to have some kind of quiet mental space, whether it's meditation, whether it's just, sitting in a room without electronics, without TV, just quiet space to help you reset. It doesn't have to be like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I know that there are probably some folks who are listening that was like, "Oh, this sounds so good." It sounds so good. It's so much easier said than done. And the answer is yes, you're right. However, reminding yourself that you deserve it,
Mhm.
and that and that your life depends on it. When we think about kind of alleviating those stresses and how stress exacerbates
Everything.
everything.
Mhm.
It exacerbates it all. Because I know for myself, I have to. I talk big. I talk big and talk real tough. I tell my students, like, and I'm not gonna be on at this time. This is what you can expect. And I'm sure they're like, well, Dr. Russell, she's saying this thing, but I too have to. I have to engage in self-talk to stick to it. Because
We're works in progress. It takes,
yes.
yeah, it's an effort. You have to keep doing it, but it gets easier and it's totally worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked up to the month off.
Yeah.
First it was,
Yes.
okay, I'm gonna work from home Mondays and Fridays. I was like, ooh, that feels good. And I was like, okay, I gotta make sure I take my spring break week or take a couple of days here and there. And I mean, practice makes perfect, and you'll realize how good you feel
Mhm.
when there's less of a burden. So yeah, just keep working on it. Small bites. I like that. Small bites.
Right, small bites, small bites. And I think it's also important, you know, especially now, you know, I know a lot of people are coronavirus and COVID talked out, but the truth of the matter is, you know, when we're looking at the disparities and, you know, the impact on our community, you know, a lot of it is, you know, it's not, the news is not breaking news to us in terms of these underlying conditions. It's just that we have found ourselves in a place where, you know, the spotlight is on because there is this new thing. It's not so new anymore, but this novel thing that is bumping up against these existing issues. And so, you know, like, no, you know, this isn't new, but it is also something that reminds us of why we need to do what we can do to live a more healthy lifestyle. I mean, and that is from everything from, you know, our self-care, creating a self-care plan or some self-care practices and all of the other things that we need to do to be healthier.
Mhm.
Let's see. I had another question that I wanted to pose, and then maybe we can check and see if we have some questions in the chat or the Q&A. All right. So here's one I wanted to make sure to cover. What recommendations do you have for bridging the gap between this cultural mistrust of medical and helping professionals and the critical needs of our community? You know, that's I don't think that there's not much more setting that one up.
That's a good one. And I'm definitely interested in seeing what Dr. Calloway says, particularly from the OB standpoint. But from a primary care standpoint, I like to advocate folks to, number one, have good primary care relationships, right? So having that one person that you usually call, you know, medical provider that you check in with a couple of times a year to make sure you're doing well. And also that person that helps you to navigate the system, right? So it helps you to figure out the different resources that you may need for different things. So I definitely always want to advocate for that. And definitely want to advocate for, if you are a person of color, finding a provider of color, someone that you feel comfortable with, someone that you can relate to and who speaks your language, literally and figuratively. And if you know, let's say you've grown up in a certain practice, just same with church, same with cosmetologists, you know, you've grown up and you've always seen this person, your mom and your auntie and your dad have always seen this person, but you don't really have, you know, the same rapport. Go find somebody else. Find someone that fits your needs and that listens to you and that helps you the most. Because we're out there. We're out there. Physicians of color, providers of color are there to help, and we're ready to listen. So, you know, don't settle.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
So are some of the folks on students who may be interested in going in health professions?
I would say probably so.
Okay, well, maybe I'll speak to it from that different angle. If you're interested in being a healthcare professional, because I agree with everything that Dr. Swiner said. I will say, if you are planning to be a healthcare professional or any sort of service professional, be comfortable, especially as a physician, knowing that physicians have had this sort of role in society of ooh, ah, blah, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, I have a tremendous amount of knowledge, expertise, and experience, and I'm exceptionally good at what I do.
Yeah.
However, I am able to recognize that there are other members within my space who also bring tremendous value to caring for that birthing or pregnant person. And we need to center them at the experience and then work to make sure healthcare doesn't do a good job of centering the patient in the experience and then adjusting our system around that.
Yes.
So some of the things that you can do, I work with doulas, I work with midwives, I work with social workers, I work with nurses. I understand that we all have value that we bring to the table. We all have roles and things that we can do in order to make that healthcare experience the best for that patient is who we should be centering. So if you're going through that trajectory, don't be always intentionally collaborate with other folks in the space. Sometimes it's even like pharmacists or psychologists for mental health. You know, we need to work together and not this hierarchy. Obviously, know your own strengths and your gifts and what you bring to the table, but appreciate others.
Absolutely. Yes. I love those responses. I love those responses. We do have some questions from the audience. And at this time, I want to go ahead and pose the first one. This is from Dr. Franklin. It seems that flexibility of career path is a present constant across presenter and moderator. For women that do not have flexibility, do not have flexible paths and are rather constrained with set schedules and responsibilities, how can they be intentional in self-care? And I think we maybe kind of touched on that, but maybe we can elaborate a little more. For women that don't have flexible paths and are rather constrained with set schedules and responsibilities, how can they be intentional in self-care?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, what Dr. Calloway alluded to earlier, and I think actually, Erica, I think you mentioned, the word control earlier as well. If, so I understand if you're, just getting started in your career or just starting out with a particular job or role, you may not have a lot of control. But the more that you've worked in a role or worked with a team or worked in a certain department, you should feel empowered to ask, for those things that you need, ask for that schedule change or ask for that department change if you're not necessarily getting along or it's stressful to work with a certain supervisor or team lead, et cetera. You should feel empowered to ask. And if that setting isn't fitting your needs or doing, you can't, have the time off to take care of certain things, then you may need to find a different area of work. I know that's not easy, but you should feel empowered to at least consider those things and talk to your supervisors and your higher ups and ask. All they can say is no, but you have to ask for that time and ask for that change. The other thing that I always want to encourage, particularly women, particularly Black women, to do is to start your own business. That's not easy too, but it's probably not as hard as you think. To start your own thing so you can have more control over your schedule. And that may mean backing down, your spending, or that may mean switching things up a little bit, or that may mean your partner or spouse may have to take on a little bit more responsibility so that you have freer time. But if you can be in control of your own earnings and your own livelihood, that makes self-care a little bit easier.
100%. And yeah, I agree. One of the important things I would kind of challenge you to think that you probably have more ability to be flexible and than you think, and think outside of the box, so to speak, about how things are. Sometimes you have to dream, have some permission to dream a different vision for yourself, and then see if you can tweak your life, like she was saying, ask for the things that you want and see if it can happen. The worst can happen is you be where you were before. And again, all this isn't necessarily easy. Like it wasn't, I'm sure you didn't just like, I'm just going to start a publishing company and be like, I didn't just decide I'm going to start a podcast. But there is that belief that we can do it.
Yes.
And you just put one foot in front of the other, and you just keep making steps forward, and you just keep going. And then I 100% agree, if there's some sort of business aspect, having control over your time is really like helpful and beneficial for self-care. And I'm saying, like, we make a few steps forward, it's a few steps back, and then a few, it's a process, but it's just the showing up and the keep going is the piece.
Right. And I see a question of, is stress natural? Yes, stress is a natural part of adjustment. Absolutely. There's a couple of things that come to mind for me as it relates to that question about self-care and kind of different levels of flexibility. When to self-care specifically, I think it's important for us to know and acknowledge that self-care, there's not a prescription for self-care. There's not a one size fit all, you know, and not everybody will value the same thing. What they need for self-care is going to be different. So everybody's not going, you know, to the spa or you know.
I don't do that either. I mean, for me, it's like I like to be able to read. I like to be able to exercise when I want to.
Yeah,
And
right.
sometimes I don't want to do anything. You know, I like to be able to cook dinner for my family. That actually is relaxing for me sometimes.
Right.
Like have
Yeah.
a recipe and just it's fun, try something new, not a rush. Like today, like I'm not working, I can start cooking at 3 o'clock in the afternoon if I want to, you know?
Right,
So
right,
it's
yeah.
just having that freedom and flexibility. It's not like I'm spending tons of money on this or that or the other. It's just a lot of it is having control over my time.
Yeah.
Right. And figuring out what you value and, you know, and kind of creating space for that thing to the best of your ability. The other thing that I wanted to kind of echo was that the importance of fit. Fit, you know, when it comes to sometimes if the rub is feeling really aggressive, you know, you have to ask yourself the question of you know, is this a good fit or should I be looking for someplace else or something different?
Mm-hmm.
And as someone, I often share with my students that I was a first generation college student. And a lot of my scholarship is around this notion of being first still. And so I think that there's an intergenerational communication part of this too. Like there's a need for there to be some discussion and some reconciling of some old ways of doing some things that worked for a time that are not serving us well now, that we can kind of lay them to rest, you know, have an understanding of like not dismissing them. They were purposeful for that season. And now these are some new things that we are moving into and imagining. And I also think that from a developmental perspective, some of the conversations that we're having need to start earlier in order for people to feel empowered to ask for things, to advocate for themselves, to know that they have a right to you know, a quality of life, you know, regardless of their station in life, if you will, you know, old school language. But yeah, I think that's really important too.
Absolutely. I'll throw in real quick, Dr. Erica, that, you know, so I'm raising 2 daughters, 2 Black women, future Black women. And we're, oh, yeah, cool. And so the conversations that we try to have, you know, and, you know, of course, we talk about Black girl magic and strong Black women and all that, but I also try to model this whole self-care for them now. This whole idea of making sure that you're taking some quiet time for yourself. Or I try to ask them, you know, so we grew up, you know, I don't know how old you guys are, but in my generation, you know, you were striving to be a straight A student and you were in all the clubs and you did a sport and you volunteered because you wanted to have good community service and get to a good college. You know, I'm having the conversation with my girls, you know, do you enjoy doing this thing? Would you like to do that? How do you like it? Do you not like that? Okay, let's do something different. I may also have to get comfortable with the idea that they may not want to go to college. Like they may want to start investing, or they may want to write a book, or they may want to start a company. We, as the quote older generation, have to get more comfortable with allowing them to discover those things, because I don't think we were allowed to do that culturally growing up.
100%. I
Yeah.
agree. And I do the same thing. Model self-care for my girls. Also model that they don't have to conform to necessarily traditional things and they can try new things on this whole like online business journey. I've shared all of the things with them and how it's grown and they get excited about things. And so modeling that possibility is really important.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I have another question from the audience. Do you think when Black women speak out about their issues, they are framed as weak by others or complaining?
Yes.
I mean, probably, but I mean, I don't know if it's, I mean, I'm 46. At this point, I'm like, I'm gonna do what I have to do. Like, I can't, a bit, so probably yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
And we have to stop doing that to each other,
It's
right? We
true.
have to stop treating each other like that and making each other feel that way. We need to support each other. Particularly, you know, and I'm talking to Black women, and we need to support each other and give each other that safe space to feel okay with asking for help and feeling vulnerable. And I think it's getting better. I think this pandemic has taught us a lot. And one thing that I hope it's taught us is to be vulnerable and ask and connect with your people and get help where you need help. So, you know, let's extend more grace both to ourselves and to our sisters so we feel more comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I think we're definitely getting better. Like, oh, especially when you get to a point. There's another thing about money isn't everything. Money isn't happiness, but money can buy you some help sometimes.
That's right. That's right.
Or you can work or some things aren't as expensive as you think, but you can tweak things a little bit and get a few coins together, have somebody come clean your house, or
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She's coming in the morning.
okay.
Hallelujah.
And some of my friends in circle, we like, well, who you getting to help you? Like, what you getting help with now? Like, who's doing your get your groceries delivered if you can.
Yes.
Do those little things. Maybe do I get my nails done? No, I don't. But my groceries get delivered. So
good for you.
So you have to prioritize, and not sometimes it involves a little bit of an investment to get help if you can.
Right.
Right.
So one funny and then something a bit ironic, but not ironic. So going back to the whole idea of the Superwoman syndrome, you know, when we talk about having people come in to clean up, you know, people often talk about how, you know, a lot of Black women who embrace that have to clean before the cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So, you know, that is a thing too. We're just going.
Yes.
That is a thing. I know people who do it. They're like, well, I got to straighten up before someone comes in to clean.
I literally just told my children, y'all better clean up that bedroom. Mr. Wanda's coming tomorrow. Like, but she's cleaning, right? No,
right.
Clean.
Yeah, but I happen to be in the car, you know, which doesn't happen a whole lot since I'm doing so much from home these days. But I was in the car and I was listening to a local radio station, and I wish that I heard who had made the comment so that I can give them their credit. But it was a similar kind of conversation among women. And one of the things that was stated is that oftentimes for women and Black women in particular, you know, one of the difference that was being stated between men and women is that women have the pressure to be liked, whereas men have had the pressure. I mean, the goal is to be liked, and men is to be respected, such that when you know, women have spoken out, you know, kind of related to that. The question, you know, they're, you know, the perceptions of them are that, you know, they're troublesome, you know, that the narrative, the framing of their speaking out has often looked different. But, you know, that's something that we just have to continue to push beyond and to name it, call it out, so that it is not just something that is accepted as being normative, and folks can see when they are stereotyping and generalizing and discriminating and all of those things.
Yeah, I see the questions in the box. Maybe we can, I kind of want to speak to the what can Black men do to support Black women, and
yes,
the non-traditional roles in long-term relationships, because for me they kind of go together. So my Black, and I guess it says, what can a privileged Black male do to support Black women, and then do non-traditional roles in a long-term monogamous relationship decrease the occurrence of the syndrome? I would say yes, in terms it does. My husband does a lot around the house that is considered non-traditional. So he gets the girls up, he does their hair in the morning for school, he takes them to school. He enjoys doing so. He does consulting work, so he has a flexible schedule. He picks them up from school every day. he does things like the doctor's appointments, and he takes care of a lot of like the paperwork, because God knows I get all that confused. So he steps in, and he definitely very much takes the approach is this is what has to be done. We just need to do it. So, so sometimes he cooks, sometimes I cook. So I'm grateful that we've been able to make that work. And he's also modeling for our girls that yes, a man can do. He does some mean Afro puffs, like, in their hair, and he's secure and confident in that. So be able to just kind of be willing as a Black man to step into what may be considered like non-traditional things. And don't feel guilty. But I've even sometimes felt guilty about it. Like in the morning, he helps get the girls going, and that's when I work out. And I was like, well, I feel bad. Like, should I be? And he's like, just go work out. Like, just,
That's so wonderful. That's good. And it takes a manly man. It takes a manly man to accept that those non-traditional roles are okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Similarly, my husband has always had a work from home business. So when we decided to have children, we had to figure out, okay, well, is it going to be daycare? How much maternity leave am I going to have, et cetera? He stayed home with the girls, both of them, until age 2, both girls. So he's like, taking calls and websites and rocking them, and, at the same time. And he was completely content and happy in that role. He says now, they're 8 and 10. He, to this day, values that time that he had with them. And hopefully they will always remember, that daddy was there with them, when they came home from school, and he was the one that helped to get dinner started. And the other big thing that I'll say that Black men can do is to not make their partner feel guilty. So you mentioned guilt, right? Feeling that guilt, that maternal guilt and that wifely guilt that we often have. If you have a partner that does not make you feel guilty, or that actually supports you sitting down and being still and having that space to work out, that is tremendously helpful, because then we don't carry that weight of feeling like we are not doing enough. So, I always shout out Rick Swiner, almost anytime I'm speaking, because I could not be a superwoman if it weren't for him. Right.
Same. Yeah.
Yes. I think this is another important question, and I'm again mindful of our time. Let's see. Yes. What would you suggest for students who feel that they're always under pressure to do a lot of projects and homework and taking care of the family and being away from home, etc.?
God bless y'all.
Yes.
I remember. Yeah. Don't you remember, Dr. Kelly?
Yes. Yes. I mean, number one, give yourself some grace.
Yes.
You are doing the best that you can. So just give yourself some grace. That is number one. So don't beat yourself up. And then I know this sounds like and you can be like, okay, if you say so, but I think 2 things that actually help when you have a lot of stuff to do is intentionally having a gratitude practice. So you can be mindful of the things that are going well, and you can hold on to those in the midst of pressure. So whether it's identifying 1 or 2 things that you can be grateful for, that can help. And then just carving out tiny amounts. I know it sounds like crazy, but 5 or 10 minutes of white space meditation, turning everything off, calming things down, can help you to deal with the chaos.
Yeah. And I agree with that as well. The thing that I remember that was most helpful for me as a student, probably even more so as a medical student, was going to the CAP Center. Do we still have CAP centers on campuses, Dr. Russell?
Yes. For counseling centers.
Yes.
So yeah.
When I felt overwhelmed, or when I, couldn't get my study skills together, et cetera, going and talking to a counselor and a mentor that sat down and helped me figure out how I needed to study, what was the best way for me to study for me, because everyone learns and remembers things differently. I'm very audiovisual and needed to use my hands and my ears to remember things. I had to learn that about myself. I didn't realize that. And so it took a counselor to sit down with me and figure out, okay, this is how you're going to organize your study schedule. You're not going to cram and stay up all night because you need sleep. Right. And I definitely needed sleep. And so going and talking to someone from a therapy and a counseling perspective was tremendous for me. So please make use of that.
Yeah, asking for help.
Yeah.
For sure. Where you
Asking for
can.
help. And I will also answer this question from a faculty perspective, also from a psychologist perspective. One of the other things that I have been sharing during this season with students, I've even shared this with colleagues, the importance of managing expectations. The importance of managing expectations my students and I just did a presentation where we talked about this from the faculty perspective and the students' perspective. But sometimes we have to even check in with ourselves to determine if our expectations of ourselves are reasonable. Look at that and look at that and lay it out with the things that you are attempting to put onto your plate. Because some of the things that we put on our plate, we have placed them there. Check in, why have we placed these things on our plate? Why are they on their plate? And is everything that's on the plate necessary to be on the plate right now?
That's good.
Because sometimes the focus is on, I just want to get it done. And so I can take 18 credits, so I'm gonna take 18 credits. If I could take more, I can, but I always kind of go back to the concept of bandwidth. We only have so much capacity. And, when we have a tendency to, if we've had success in doing a lot of things, we keep piling it on and say, well, because it worked before. I tell students all the time, for me, certain things, they work until they don't work anymore. And when we overextend and we kind of, when we place an exorbitant amount of things onto our plate, and then there's these other people who are going to be also adding to the plate. So in your classes, there's assignments in this class, there's an assignment in this class, this is this family obligation. We can count on that something's going to happen that we didn't plan for. And if we're maxed out, like, there's no more room. And so managing expectations, checking in with self expectations, I would say are really important also. And to think about how those things, when we overextend, it has an impact on us. It definitely has an impact on us. And it's okay. It's okay to not do it all.
To say no. That's a big
say no and set boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, I see we're at about 7:15 or so, almost. We have one more question. Let's see. Do you think that Black women experience the Superwoman syndrome more than any other race of women? And I would add to that, like, is there another race of women who kind of moves in the world to where such a construct would even be applied to them?
So I'll start by answering, yes, I think we do. Black women, I think, do suffer from the Superwoman syndrome probably more than any other population. However, it can happen in any, color, creed, religion, et cetera, background. It can happen to all of us. I know our Asian American sisters and brothers and sisters right now are also going through some particular trauma with some of this violence that's happening with the pandemic and since coronavirus and all this stuff has happened. So, and I think, particularly when it comes from, if you come from an immigrant family that has, come to America and has the American dream and is fighting to make things better for their families, I'm sure that can also be an issue with just trying to, to reach that status that you feel is the American dream once you get to this country. So I don't know. I think just we have a very unique history, clearly. Slavery, we are still living with the complications of that. You know, our DNA changed because of it. And stress, unfortunately, has become part of our genetics. And it has impacted our health in multiple ways to this day. So I think we have a very unique history in terms of that. And so that's why I think it's different and it's more prevalent for us. But certainly everyone can experience some form of it.
Mhm,
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
yes. Um, so one of the things that I would say is important for all of us as we begin to wrap up this session, that feels like a part one to me. Feels like there's still so much. I had more questions. I'm going to be very honest that I had more questions, but I'm so appreciative of this opportunity to have this dialogue. I think it's important for us all to be reminded that we are all human beings. We are living in physical spaces that require us to make decisions in order to sustain these physical, these bodies that we have been given. And so it's really important for us to be mindful of that, and to, you know, be unapologetically aware of the need to protect that body. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
The only one you got. So
It's the only one, it is the only one. And so I really think that it's important. I think perhaps as we, for a final thought, I mean, I guess I would ask that you all, if there's any final thoughts that you would like to share with the audience, and perhaps, one recommendation or resource that might be helpful as we all move toward um, the pursuit of a more holistically well lifestyle. It's a work in progress, but yeah, if we can end that way.
Yeah. Uh, I like to always say, you don't have to be Superwoman in order to be a superwoman. You can create the life that you want to live, create your quote unquote balance. We talk more about integration now, but create whatever that balance is for you without literally killing yourself. And some of the resources, the shameless plug, I've written 2 books on the Superwoman complex, so you can definitely find resources through me. And then my colleague, Dr. Cheryl Giscombe, we are also doing some Instagram lives. She is the researcher and founder of the Black Superwoman Schema. So for instance, tomorrow we're doing an Instagram live on my Instagram at Doc Swiner on that topic. So talking, coming to things like this, being part of Zooms and webinars and conferences, and talking and following folks like myself and Dr. Calloway, Rankin, is very important, because you have those folks that you can reach out to and ask those questions to, and not feel that you have those stupid questions that you can't get your answers to. So we're out here.
yes, and I will say, also shameless plug, my website is drnicolerankins.com if you're interested in pregnancy and birth, or I'm on social media as well at Dr. Nicole Rankins. So my one takeaway is that just know that you are worthy. Worthy, and you can fill in the blank after that with whatever you want to put, but you are worthy, and always hold on to that and remember that, because the outside world doesn't always see, especially Black women's value, but know that you are worthy. And I always like to put in a plug for moving your body in some way. I love yoga and meditation are my 2. I don't like to get all cardiovascular and sweaty. That's just not my thing. But just tiny bits of moving your body. There are tons of like free YouTube videos and things like that you can do at home. And then Headspace, Calm, those apps can be helpful. And it's just short little bites. It doesn't have to be anything major, because your mindset and working on your mindset is a big part of your overall health and well-being.
Thank you. I was reading one of the comments in the chat. We had an event last week, and once it ended, it ended, and I couldn't see the chat, so I just paused for a second just so that I could see that last comment there. But again, I want to thank you so much, both of you, for spending this time with us, for sharing, and for all the work that you do. It's important every day, all the time, and definitely in this season, I have been acutely aware of how important it is to have access to medical professionals like yourself, who are passionate, are compassionate, are woke, and are considering, the things that, are important to us in ways that are beyond the academic journal, if you will.
Yeah, and I feel comfortable that, we're both confident and we know our value and we know we're ready to bring it,
Right. Yes. And I mean, and it means so much, at times when, I know there are folks who are still very skeptical, or concerned about the establishment, if you will. So to know that we have folks who are definitely, of course, competent and confident and willing to have these kinds of conversation, it's definitely invaluable. And so we appreciate you. We thank everyone for joining us this evening. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do something very similar soon.
Yes, thank you all.
Be
All
good,
right.
be safe, y'all.
Yes,
All
and
right.
I always wait. Why do we always wait? We can't help but not wait, so I'm gonna wait.
Get your COVID vaccines.
Yes.
Yes. So I was trying to